Folks, this is Andy Caldwell.
I want to thank you for having me. I've lived on the Central Coast for about 42 years, started in Lompoc. I've worked my way north to Nipomo for the last 14 years. If some of you have never been to Nipomo, the best way to describe it is the Montecito of Guadalupe. And, you ought to stop by Jocko's and check us out sometime. Now, I'll tell you, I'm having a tough time figuring out how Prop 19 came to pass. Prop 19, as you know, would legalize marijuana, and I'm thinking, you know, they used to have these commercials of big fat cat corporate types sitting in a smoke-filled room trying to figure out how they were going to shaft the common man. The only thing I could figure out is we had some potheads in a back room filled with smoke thinking, how can we get pot legalized in the state of California? And they figure, I know, let's promise them we can generate taxes. Now, some of those same people want our governor and lieutenant governor to be Moonbeam and Gavin Newsom. And that's still when the most of the state is sober. After we legalize marijuana, I think in the next tag team's going to be Cheech and Chong. Now, Prop 19 is a joke. It should be a joke because marijuana is still going to be against the law, the federal law. But nonetheless, voters next week are going to decide whether marijuana is going to be legal. But they're going to decide a lot of other things too. One of the most important things they're going to decide is the fate of Prop 23. Now, what Prop 23 does is it temporarily suspends AB 32. Now, how many of you seen the commercial with the lady from the American Lung Association on the television telling people that these greedy oil companies and these major polluters are trying to choke and kill us all by alleviating and reducing the regulations affecting pollution in the state of California? We've all seen it. Well, it's a lie. Because what AB 32 regulates is not pollution per se, but carbon dioxide. What it regulates is what we breathe out every day, and so do 6 billion other people on the planet. The trees and all plant life would collapse without carbon dioxide, and yet these politically correct lefties who are anti-business, anti-capitalism, have now convinced people that CO2 is a threat to the planet's health and well-being. Now, this coming Tuesday at the County Board of Supervisors here in San Luis Obispo County, the Board of Supervisors is going to review a plan to basically eliminate carbon, this dangerous gas. Plus, they're going to do some land use planning. Now, this is the God-honest truth, folks. One of the things they're planning on doing is to create an escape route for animals that are threatened by global warming. Now, have you ever seen the signs on the freeway that have, you know, deer crossing, bear crossing, antelope crossing? I've never figured out how they get the animals to read those signs and know that's where they're supposed to cross the road. But now they're going to go one step further, and they're going to have a sign out there for the animals: colder weather, go this way. Now, we already live in coastal California. Where are they going to go from here? Well, that's where Gibson, Patterson, and Hill are going to put their collective minds to solve this coming Tuesday. This is another example of Al Gore's radical vision for America coming to fruition here on a local level. Now, when I was in college some 30 years ago, I had a political science class. And in this political science class, I read this book by the Club of Rome. The Club of Rome is a preeminent think tank in the world. And what the Club of Rome was concerning itself with is they said back then in the 1950s, the 50s, 60s, and 70s, the world was marked by a conflict between the East and the West, the Soviet bloc versus the free market capitalist economies and nations. And they said, well, that's going to go away. But the future conflict is going to be is between the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. Between the have countries and the have not. The industrialized versus the third world. And they said for us to achieve world peace, we're going to have to redistribute wealth. We're going to have to redistribute manufacturing and industrial technology and capabilities to the southern hemisphere countries, or we're going to have war, third world war, what have you. Now, I read this book as a wide-eyed Democrat, and I thought, fat chance. This is a stupid book. It's a stupid theory. Nobody's going to volunteer to give up their wealth. Well, 15 years later, I was reading a book by the late Dr. Dixie Lee Ray. Dixie Lee Ray was the former chair of the Atomic Energy Commission. She was the former governor of the state of Washington. She had a real PhD. She also had about 30 honorary PhDs from universities around the world. And she cited a subsequent Club of Rome report. That subsequent report said we figured out a way to get the northern hemisphere countries to give up their wealth, to give up their edge in manufacturing and industrial capacity and technology. We're going to convince them they're saving the planet. She named Al Gore in her book 15 years ago as the only member of the United States Senate that had signed on to this agenda. Folks, just like Obamacare redistributes your payments for insurance, your capacity to have insurance to those that have not, what global warming is about, what AB 32 is about, is redistributing manufacturing and industrial capacities to the have-not countries. So even though they're supposed to be saving the planet, they're supposed to be saving the planet from global warming, the third world countries don't have any caps. How does that save the planet? And how does AB 32, which says California is going to go it alone on its own version of cap and trade, how does that save the planet? When, for instance, AB 32 says California, you're going to pull the plug on any electricity you get from coal. That's what AB 32 does. That's one of the things it does. So California, we're going to cut our electricity supplies from coal, whereas China's building a new coal plant every 11 days. So what did we accomplish? Well, what we accomplished is what Peter Ueberroth said back in 1991 when he was studying the California recession. He said California is not suffering from a recession as much as it's suffering from self-inflicted blows to our own economy by our own government. The state of California is a finely honed job-killing machine. And nothing has changed. Right now, the farming industry, construction industry, and trucking industry are all faced with what's called a diesel engine rule. They're going to have to replace all the diesel engines in the state of California twice in the next 12 years. Now, let me tell you the rest of that story. The lead manager of this project of the diesel engine rule is a guy by the name of Tran. Tran works for the California Air Resources Board. Mr. Tran has a PhD after his name. Mr. Tran bought his PhD online for $1,000. Now, there's a guy named James Enstrom who has a PhD after his name. He got it from Stanford, not online, but from Stanford. Mr. Enstrom, Dr. Enstrom, has been with the UC system as a research scientist for almost 40 years. Mr. Enstrom blew the lid off on Tran's fake PhD. Dr. Enstrom blew the lid off on the junk science behind the diesel engine rule. Tran's keeping his job. Dr. Enstrom's getting fired.